When the emergency call came in about Dorothy Williams being out of her life-saving heart medication with no way to get it during the worst blizzard Cedar Falls had seen in 20 years, I knew someone had to help her. As a pharmacy delivery driver who had spent 38 years serving mountain communities, I understood that sometimes you have to drive straight into danger when someone's life depends on it. You won't believe what happened next. I never expected that saving Dorothy would lead to Air Force Pararescue teams landing helicopters in my backyard, or that her son, Colonel Williams, would honor me with their highest civilian medal for doing what any decent person would do. Sometimes when you risk everything to help a stranger, you discover that heroes recognize heroes, no matter what uniform they wear. Hi everyone, welcome to Life's Changing Stories. Now, let's dive into today's story. The howling wind outside Valley Drugs Pharmacy sounded like a freight train bearing down on Cedar Falls, Colorado, as the worst blizzard in 2 decades transformed the mountain town into an Arctic wasteland, where even emergency services had declared travel impossible and ordered all residents to shelter in place until the storm passed. Harry Mitchell was preparing to lock up the pharmacy and head home to his wife Linda when the emergency phone call came in. An elderly woman's neighbor reporting that Dorothy Williams was completely out of her heart medication and facing a potentially fatal cardiac event if she didn't receive her prescription within hours. Harry's weathered hands gripped the steering wheel of his pharmacy delivery van as he stared through the windshield at snow that was already 18 inches deep and falling so heavily that streetlights disappeared into white oblivion just 20 feet away, creating visibility conditions that would challenge even the most experienced mountain drivers who had spent decades navigating Colorado's treacherous winter roads. At 54, Harry had driven these mountain routes for 38 years, but he'd never attempted a delivery during weather conditions that had prompted the National Weather Service to issue life-threatening blizzard warnings and the Sheriff's Department to suspend all non-essential travel throughout the county. The mathematics of the emergency were brutally simple. Dorothy Williams lived 12 miles up Silverbrook Road in an isolated cabin that could only be reached by a winding mountain path that hadn't been plowed and probably wouldn't be accessible for another 2 days. But her heart medication was sitting in Harry's van, and she would likely suffer a fatal heart attack before morning if someone didn't find a way to get through snowdrifts that were already approaching 3 feet in depth with no signs of the storm weakening, or emergency crews being able to reach remote areas until weather conditions improved significantly. What Harry couldn't have known as he made the decision to risk his life driving through conditions that had defeated emergency response teams and experienced mountain rescue specialists was that Dorothy Williams was the mother of Colonel Robert Williams, one of the Air Force's most elite pararescue operators, who was currently deployed on a classified mission halfway around the world, and would soon learn that a civilian delivery driver had accomplished what his entire specially trained unit couldn't do: reach someone who desperately needed rescue when all other options had been exhausted. The familiar morning routine that Harry Mitchell followed at Valley Drugs Pharmacy had remained largely unchanged over the 38 years since he first started working there as a 16-year-old delivery assistant, learning the mountain roads of Cedar Falls, Colorado, while helping elderly and homebound residents receive the medications and medical supplies they needed to maintain their health and independence in a rural community where access to healthcare required careful coordination and reliable transportation services. At 54, Harry had become an institution in Cedar Falls, known throughout 3 counties for his knowledge of every back road, shortcut, and alternative route that could get essential medications to people who depended on his reliability during both routine deliveries and emergency situations. Harry's wife Linda often joked that he knew more about the residents along his delivery routes than most people knew about their own neighbors, remembering medical histories, family situations, and personal preferences that helped him provide the kind of personalized service that made Valley Drugs an essential part of the community's healthcare infrastructure rather than simply another business that filled prescriptions and collected payments. Tom Winters, the pharmacy owner, had been offering Harry the manager position for over a decade, recognizing his dedication, extensive knowledge, and the trust that customers placed in his judgment and reliability. However, Harry consistently declined promotions that would take him away from direct patient contact and the delivery routes that connected him to the people whose lives depended on his willingness to navigate challenging terrain and weather conditions to ensure they received their medications on schedule. Weather forecasters had been warning about the approaching storm system for several days, predicting blizzard conditions that would make travel extremely dangerous throughout the mountain regions where Cedar Falls was located. Most residents had stocked up on essential supplies and prepared to remain indoors until the storm passed, leaving the town looking like a ghost town as snow began accumulating faster than road crews could clear it from even the main thoroughfares. Just as Harry was completing his final deliveries and preparing to secure the pharmacy for the night, Tom received an emergency phone call from someone who identified herself as Margaret Porter's neighbor, explaining that the elderly woman was completely out of her critical heart medication due to a delivery truck that had been unable to navigate the mountain roads leading to her isolated cabin. Without her medication tonight, Mrs. Porter could suffer a serious cardiac event, the neighbor explained desperately. She's already showing signs of distress, and I'm afraid she won't make it through the night without her prescription. Harry immediately asked for Dorothy's address, learning that she lived on Silverbrook Road, a remote mountain location that would require navigating 12 miles of winding, unpaved roads that were unlikely to have been treated or plowed during the intensifying storm conditions. Emergency services have suspended all operations, Tom informed Harry, consulting weather reports and official announcements about travel restrictions. The sheriff's department has issued a shelter-in-place order for the entire county. Harry looked outside at snow that was already 8 inches deep and accumulating rapidly, with wind conditions that were creating dangerous drifts and visibility problems that would challenge even the most experienced drivers using vehicles specifically equipped for winter mountain travel. "We can't just let her suffer a heart attack because of weather," Harry said, firmly, reaching for his keys despite the obvious dangers involved in attempting to drive through conditions that had defeated professional emergency response teams with specialized equipment and training. Tom quickly filled Dorothy's prescription while gathering emergency supplies, including thermal blankets, a high-powered flashlight, and emergency flares that might be necessary if Harry's van became disabled during the treacherous journey to reach someone whose life depended on receiving medical treatment that night. "Turn back if conditions become too dangerous," Tom warned, though both men understood that Harry's determination to help people in medical emergencies had never wavered during nearly 4 decades of serving Cedar Falls residents who trusted him to find ways to reach them when other options were unavailable. The first 5 miles of Harry's journey were manageable on main roads that had received some treatment from snow plows and salt trucks, but conditions deteriorated rapidly when he turned onto County Road 19, where heavy snow accumulation and strong winds created driving challenges that tested both his vehicle's capabilities and his decades of experience navigating treacherous mountain terrain during Colorado's harsh winter weather. Silverbrook Road proved to be barely passable, with snow depths that exceeded his van's ground clearance and required him to stop twice to dig himself out of drifts that would have trapped most vehicles permanently, forcing drivers to abandon their attempts and wait for professional rescue services that weren't available during the current emergency conditions. Visibility was reduced to just a few feet by the howling wind and horizontal snow that made it nearly impossible to distinguish the road from surrounding terrain, requiring Harry to navigate primarily by memory and instinct while maintaining enough forward momentum to avoid getting stuck while not driving so fast that he lost control on the icy surface beneath the accumulating snow. A journey that normally required 20 minutes of careful mountain driving took over an hour of constant struggle against weather conditions that grew progressively worse as Harry climbed higher into the mountains where Dorothy Williams lived in isolation that was both peaceful during good weather and potentially deadly during emergencies when outside help couldn't reach remote locations. When Harry finally reached the Williams cabin, Dorothy's neighbor Janet opened the door with obvious relief, having been monitoring the storm and wondering whether anyone would be able to reach them before Dorothy's condition deteriorated beyond the point where medication could provide effective treatment. Dorothy was sitting in her living room wrapped in blankets, her breathing labored and her complexion showing the grayish pallor that indicated serious cardiovascular distress requiring immediate medical intervention to prevent potentially fatal complications. Harry quickly delivered the medication, and Janet helped Dorothy take her prescribed dosage while expressing gratitude for Harry's willingness to risk his safety during conditions that had prevented all other forms of assistance from reaching their remote location. "The phone lines went down hours ago," Janet explained, "but I was able to reach the pharmacy using my emergency satellite phone to report Dorothy's situation." "I was just doing my job," Harry said, humbly, though everyone in the room understood that driving through life-threatening blizzard conditions to deliver medication went far beyond normal job responsibilities and represented the kind of extraordinary commitment to helping others that distinguished truly exceptional people from those who simply followed minimum requirements. Dorothy insisted that Harry spend the night at the cabin due to worsening storm conditions that made return travel impossible until daylight, and improved visibility allowed for safer navigation of mountain roads that remained treacherous even after the storm passed. Harry called Linda using Janet's satellite phone to confirm his safety and explain that he would be staying overnight to ensure Dorothy's condition remained stable, while waiting for weather conditions that would allow him to return home safely. By morning, the storm had passed, leaving 3 feet of fresh snow but clear skies that provided excellent visibility for the challenging drive back to Cedar Falls. Dorothy showed significant improvement, with better color and easier breathing that indicated her medication was successfully managing her cardiovascular condition and preventing the cardiac emergency that could have been fatal without Harry's intervention. Before Harry departed, Dorothy presented him with a small, worn photograph of her son wearing an Air Force uniform, explaining that he was currently serving overseas in a role that she described as complicated and that she hadn't been able to speak with him for over a year due to the classified nature of his assignments. "This is my son Robert," Dorothy said proudly. "He's Air Force Pararescue, always saving people in impossible situations. I think he'd want to meet the man who saved his mother when he couldn't be here to help." The drive back to Cedar Falls was slow but manageable in daylight conditions that allowed Harry to appreciate the beauty of the snow-covered landscape while reflecting on the satisfaction that came from successfully helping someone whose life had depended on his willingness to drive through conditions that most people would have considered suicidal. Harry noticed that the roads had been plowed more thoroughly than expected, and that there was unusual activity throughout the area, with people using unfamiliar equipment and vehicles that suggested some kind of organized response or preparation that went beyond normal snow removal and emergency services. When Harry finally arrived at his home, Linda rushed outside to embrace him with obvious relief, having spent the night worrying about his safety while monitoring weather reports and emergency broadcasts that had emphasized the life-threatening nature of the storm conditions he had driven through to help a stranger. Their emotional reunion was interrupted by the distinctive sound of rotor blades overhead, and both Harry and Linda looked up to see a massive military helicopter descending toward the field behind their modest house, creating a spectacular display of precision flying that drew neighbors from their homes to witness the unprecedented arrival of military aircraft in their quiet residential neighborhood. 6 men in specialized military uniforms emerged from the helicopter, moving with the coordinated efficiency that immediately identified them as elite military personnel conducting an official mission that required their presence in Cedar Falls for reasons that neither Harry nor Linda could begin to understand. The team leader approached Harry and Linda with a warm smile that contradicted their initial concern about why military special forces would be visiting their home without warning or explanation. "Mr. Harry Mitchell," the leader asked, extending his hand in greeting. "I'm Master Sergeant Kevin Rodriguez of Air Force Pararescue. You've done something extraordinary, and we're here to thank you properly." Inside their living room, Sergeant Rodriguez revealed that Dorothy Williams was the mother of Colonel Robert Williams, the commanding officer of their pararescue unit, who specialized in high-risk extraction operations that required the kind of courage and technical skill that made them legendary among military special operations forces. Colonel Williams was deployed on a classified mission in a hostile region when he received an emergency family notification about his mother's medical crisis, Rodriguez explained. For the first time in his career, he couldn't reach someone who desperately needed rescue, his own mother. Rodriguez continued, 8 hours later, our communication systems updated with information that a civilian delivery driver had successfully reached Mrs. Williams through conditions that our own emergency services had deemed too dangerous to attempt. Colonel Williams had immediately diverted his team after completing their mission to travel directly to Cedar Falls and personally thanked the civilian who had accomplished what even elite military rescue specialists might have found challenging under similar circumstances. Sergeant Rodriguez presented Harry with a wooden presentation box containing a medallion bearing the pararescue insignia of angel wings and shield, representing their motto, that others may live, and their commitment to saving lives, regardless of personal risk or operational difficulty. "This is our unit's Medal of Courage," Rodriguez explained. "It has never been presented to a civilian before, but Colonel Williams insisted that you embody our creed better than many who wear the uniform." One of the pararescue specialists added, "You risked your life to save someone else's mother when her son couldn't reach her. That's exactly what we do, and we recognize that kind of courage, whether it comes from military training or simply from having the heart of someone who puts others before himself." Colonel Williams had also authorized an offer for Harry to help train local emergency services using pararescue techniques, combining his extensive knowledge of local terrain with their specialized extraction protocols to create emergency response capabilities that could literally save lives during future disasters and medical emergencies. "Would you be willing to help us develop protocols that could save other people's lives?" Rodriguez asked, extending an opportunity that would allow Harry to use his experience and local knowledge to benefit the entire mountain community. Harry looked at Linda, who nodded with tears of pride in her eyes before accepting the honor and responsibility with characteristic humility. "I'd be honored to help," Harry said simply. Rodriguez provided Harry with a satellite phone that allowed him to speak directly with Colonel Williams, who was calling from his deployment location to personally thank the delivery driver who had saved his mother's life when military resources couldn't provide assistance. "Men like you are rare," Colonel Williams said, his voice reflecting both professional respect and personal gratitude. You did what I couldn't do from thousands of miles away, and my mother is alive because of your courage and determination." After the pararescue team departed, Cedar Falls buzzed with excitement about the extraordinary recognition Harry had received, and the local newspaper ran a front-page feature story about their hometown hero who had earned military honors for his dedication to serving others during the most challenging circumstances. Over the following months, Harry worked closely with Sergeant Rodriguez and his team to develop comprehensive emergency response protocols specifically designed for rural mountain communities where traditional emergency services couldn't always reach residents who needed immediate assistance during severe weather events or medical crises. Valley Drugs expanded its emergency delivery service based on the successful model Harry had demonstrated, with Harry training new drivers in winter survival techniques and emergency response procedures that he had learned from the pararescue specialists who understood the importance of preparation, proper equipment, and calculated risk-taking when lives were at stake. A year later, during another massive blizzard that struck Cedar Falls with similar intensity, the emergency response system that Harry had helped create worked perfectly, ensuring that not a single resident went without critical medications or assistance despite weather conditions that would have previously left vulnerable community members isolated and at risk. Dorothy Williams moved into town to be closer to medical care and emergency services, but she remained close friends with Harry, and often told visitors the story of how he drove through hell itself to save her life, while Harry continued to respond humbly that he was just doing his job, despite everyone understanding that his actions had gone far beyond normal professional obligations. The Medal of Courage sits prominently on Harry's mantle as a daily reminder of the connections that bind communities together and the recognition that extraordinary courage can emerge from ordinary people who choose to help others when help is desperately needed. Each winter, Harry continues to prepare his delivery van with extra emergency equipment designed by the pararescue team for civilian response operations, ensuring that he can continue serving Cedar Falls residents who depend on his reliability and willingness to navigate challenging conditions when their health and safety depend on receiving essential medications and supplies. Harry sometimes salutes military helicopters that fly overhead during training exercises, remembering the day when elite military rescuers honored a small-town delivery driver for demonstrating that courage isn't defined by uniforms or special training, but by the willingness to risk personal safety when someone else's life hangs in the balance. When Colonel Williams visits Cedar Falls during his leave time, he always stops by Harry's house for coffee and conversation, connecting two men from completely different worlds through their shared belief that no storm is too dangerous and no risk is too great when someone needs help and you have the ability to provide it. Harry still brushes off praise from neighbors and customers who call him a hero, but everyone in Cedar Falls knows better than to believe his modest claims about just doing his job. They understand that some people run from danger, some people watch from a distance, and some, the truly rare ones, drive straight into the storm when someone needs help, asking nothing in return except the satisfaction that comes from knowing they made a difference when it mattered most. The story of Harry's blizzard rescue became a legendary example of how everyday heroes can emerge from the most ordinary circumstances when they choose compassion over comfort and service over safety, proving that courage is eventually recognized and honored by those who understand its true value and significance. We hope you enjoyed today's story of love, life, and betrayal. For more free stories and entertainment from our channel, please hit the like button and don't forget to subscribe with notifications.